my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and filmed live every Sunday here at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City.
I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon. Thanks for being with us. Our final show before the holiday break. We'll be off the next couple of Sundays, but appreciate you being with us tonight. No Eagles game to compete against. My Patriots are on and not doing well over there, but my focus is with you guys for the next 25 minutes. Every week we bring on a guest. We're really honored to have. I've been a guest on his show before on News Talk 1400 WOND. It's the first time he's a guest on ours. Dan Klein.
Dan Skeldon, great to see you again, buddy.
Hi, Dan, it's great
Palma,
to have
nice
you.
to meet you too. Yeah,
Dan,
great to be here.
Lifelong South Jersey resident and really a long-time radio personality. And I don't know if you want to put a number on long time, but how many years you've been doing it now?
I can tell you exactly. I first hit the airways in 2003.
Okay.
As part of Ed Hitzel's Table for One radio show. And I used to do a little segment back when I was publishing a magazine on Eddie's show called Klein's Finds. And that was just a little ditty on stuff that I would discover during the course of the week. A great cheeseburger here, a great pastrami sandwich over here, terrific soup. And it just, I was doing that for a while, and then Dick Taylor, you remember Dick Taylor,
I do.
right? Well, Dick Taylor said, hey, you sound pretty good. You want to, and of course, in radio...
Or Dick Ireland, right?
No, actually it was Dick Taylor.
It was Dick Taylor.
Dick Ireland was the FM guy.
Oh,
and
that's
Dick Taylor
right.
was
Okay.
the AM
All
guy.
right, okay.
And the thing was, if you remember back in those days, I don't want to take up too much time, Saturday afternoons from 1 to 4 is like no man's land. It's like the Arctic, pole.
Yeah,
so
TV,
he said, hey,
radio, everything.
Yeah, he goes, hey, you want to do a show from right after Ed, Saturday from 1 to 4? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And of course, after that, we just kept rolling along. So,
all right. And
love radio.
And now you're on weeknights, right? On News Talk 1400.
Primetime radio show on News Talk 1400 WOND and 8 to 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday. And we're live and local on News Talk 1400 WOND 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night. And it's just really terrific. It's very rewarding to be able to take the temperature of the South Jersey residents on a whole host of issues. That's what I really love about it.
Now, is radio something you've always been interested in ever since you were a kid, or did it just fall in your lap?
When I was a kid, you'd always played around with the hairbrush, in front of the mirror. This is how it goes, Sal, speaking of, and you imagine perhaps, do the Walter Mitty thing. But, we're in South Jersey, so opportunities to make that a reality are not, perhaps as abundant as the big city. So, in one way, absolutely. Did I ever think I would be like a career for me? Realistically, probably not when I was younger. But, I figured there was always hope. And then always the hairbrush.
Or remote, maybe?
What's that?
Or remote control, maybe?
Or remote control.
And I mean, your show talks about many things, news, politics, news of the day, and sometimes weather, news of the day as well. So you've probably been broadcasting through Sandy, or at least before and after Sandy and Irene. And what's been your, what do you think is the role, of AM radio, and any radio host, before, during, and after big weather events?
Obviously, what you do is the before, letting people know what's going on, what's coming, what to anticipate, what to expect in the best possible way you can based on the information you have so that people can prepare accordingly. During Sandy, I'll never forget, now I was on a different radio station at the time. They were at 34th Street in Ocean City.
And that's prime flooding country, right?
And on Sandy, it was loaded. And I actually had the job, the owner of the stations, and I had just broken out. We had stayed over in Linwood. We live in Ocean City. We got off the island. Was heading back on the island. It was really the day after. And the flooding was still obviously very prominent. I'm hitting 34th Street at Asbury Avenue, and I'm talking to the owner of the station. I'm like, there's no way I can get to the station without waiting booths. I mean, it was that deep. It was that severe in Ocean City, even a day after Sandy.
And you've been a lifelong resident. I mean,
Yes.
like, what are your most? It was Sandy it as far as most memorable storm, or does it go back further than
No,
that?
it goes to my most earliest memory is the '62 March storm. We lived on Wissahickon Avenue, 225 North Wissahickon Avenue in Ventnor Gardens, which it's known as.
And how old were you during the '62
I
storm?
was, 62. I'm 4 years old.
All right.
It's my first, the awareness is just starting to come
sure.
to you, And I'll never forget, these were like starter homes for, middle class families, and there wasn't like a big porch. There was just kind of a landing, and then like 3 or 4 stairs. And I'll never forget standing on the landing as just a little kid and looking out, and the water was all the way up and like almost to the top of the landing, but not quite. And I'm thinking to myself, this is, what's going to happen here,
Right.
But fortunately, that was where it crested the
Right.
It didn't breach the house.
And that taught us too. That is something we always remind people. Hurricanes get the names, but nor'easters can be just as bad. I mean, they don't officially get names. There's no nor'easter warning, but nor'easters can be just as bad as hurricanes. And we learned that, especially if you're a lifelong or year-long resident along the shore. I mean, we get very seldom hurricanes, but we get battered by nor'easters sometimes multiple times a winter.
The nor'easters, as you know, and as anybody who lives here knows, they can be a lot more nasty than a hurricane and do a lot more damage. In kind of reviewing some of the things that you're talking about, when in this day and age, it seems like we have different kinds of storms than we had when we were kids. You had the March storm. You had, which was kind of like, I guess, a Sandy-esque type of storm.
Like that Sandy-esque.
Yeah,
I don't
that is an adjective, isn't it? We use that.
I don't remember the wind being as much as Sandy, but obviously the flooding and so forth was. But the thing is, it seems like you get a different kind of storm, Dan, like the derecho, like these wind bombs or whatever they call them. I mean, I know it's not tidal related.
Yeah, you're
but
right.
then even like it seems like these storms hit when the moon is full. The gravitational pull is such that the tide can't seem to get out and give anybody some relief. I don't know how that plays into it, but obviously.
And not every storm hits during that, but when it hits during the full moon or the new moon, you're right. It's worse because of the tides. So you always hope nor'easters hit off moon, the crescent moon or the half moon. That's when you want a nor'easter.
Is there any
hit.
pattern to that in terms of the is there any kind of pattern on full moon?
Some
half moon?
people think there is. There's no meteorological proof.
Okay.
It's tough to say. It's tough to have 2 storms, exactly the same conditions, and one hit during the new moon, one hit. It's hard to have a control experiment, but some people
Now we
think
have,
there is something to
conspiracy
that. That's
theories.
right. That's right.
So, I guess, you have a lot of experience with radio.
Right.
And do you find that given the flooding that's occurring now, people are more aware of the dangers of flooding from when you first started?
Well, yes. On a variety of different fronts. I've had folks on my program. I've had the lady from owns the bait and tackle, the boat rental place in Margate. The name escapes Scott Stock, and she's a great woman, and her name escapes me at the moment. But she's been on my show. I've had some other interested, concerned citizens, I should say, who are, obviously, it seems like we get more of an encroachment from the back bays these days. Whenever there's, these types of situations, whether it's full moon or not, under the right circumstances, we seem to flood a lot more than we used to. I'm down on the south end of Ocean City I'm down all the way down at 55th Street, and we could have a whole conversation about what happens down there. But, just in just talking about the grand scheme of things on the radio, I've had people call in, and they refer to the fact that the back bay, that the water really doesn't have any place to go. And they bring up the fact that dredging hasn't been done in a long time in the back bays. And certainly, obviously, if you have a deeper ravine for the water, and there's going to be more displacement. Obviously, it's going to have the ability to hold more water. How much does that play into the flooding? I don't know. But at the end of the day, you go to the tail end of Longport, and you look at that whole back bay and that whole inlet there. It's all filled in, and it's kind of happened in almost succession from the beach dredging, and it looks like that kind of sand that's back there, and we could probably have a whole nother conversation on all of that.
But dredging is one of the tools that we can use to perhaps help battle tidal flooding, but we have to use it correctly and have to have it. So it's like dunes can help, and dredging can help.
Sure.
Living shorelines can help. Bulkheads can help.
A lot of communities, during Sandy, they said, it was the bay. I mean, look, perfect example. The over on Egg Harbor Township, I guess it's Lakes Bay, right? In the Pleasantville, Egg Harbor Township area there off of West Atlantic City. And they got ravaged by, a lot of people got ravaged. They were very visual. The homes were basically beat up pretty bad. There was no barrier there whatsoever. Whoever, I don't know, the county, the state, whomever, have since put in a whole new, I guess, burn system with a stone barrier, the whole 9 yards. And you have to figure, they haven't had a problem since.
Right.
So there's something to.
Sure.
That barrier on the bay line, but obviously it's an expensive proposition.
Right. Let me ask you this. All right, say, when you were a 4-year-old kid during the 62 storm, we didn't know a whole lot about meteorology, forecasting, flooding, and so on and so forth then. Now let's say you have like a 7 or 8-year-old kid come up during Sandy or during the next storm. How do you make kids aware of weather, of flooding, of that being a way of life along the Jersey Shore? Do you think that kids should be aware of it, and if so, how do you? Do you start the education that yet?
Well, no, the thing the kids should be aware of with the flooding that we weren't when we were kids. We thought, we saw a pool of water. The first thing we want to do is dive in.
Right.
And obviously, you don't want to do that then in the 60s, and you don't want to do it today for all kinds of reasons. So in terms of the education with the kids, I think that's probably an important area. But, growing up on the barrier islands, at least it was when I was younger, there's a certain sense and a certain feel you have about the water, about the ocean, about the bay. I was taught very early by some of the great lifeguards. When we were young in school, they took us to the Traymore Hotel in Atlantic City to teach us how to swim. So there was an education component to grow up on shore. But a lot of it, of course, was street education as well, and one expert passing it down the line too. And we had a lot of. That's the other thing about Ventnor and the Down Beach area. We had a lot of old sea dogs that kind of, it was a way of life. On our street we had like the Uppermans, and a couple of people right next to us, and great fishermen and great people to see. So, we got an education at an early age. It wasn't formal, but you got an education.
Now, I also noticed that you are on Twitter as well,
yes.
Correct? And do you think that social media has been beneficial in the ways of getting this information out about coastal flooding, or are there also, cons to having such a platform for getting the information out?
I think for the purposes of a lot of important issues like tidal flooding, getting people to be aware of the surroundings, I think that's exactly what social media is really all about. Social media, think about it, right? Social media is really a giant electronic billboard. The billboard, the posted up billboards they have in the supermarkets where everybody puts their business card, right? Or they need a plum, they need this, they put this. Well, it's a big gigantic billboard, and it has morphed into this other beast of conversation that is, has people at each other. But for the overall purposes of disseminating great information and bringing more people into that awareness category, I think social media is great for Tidal Talk and a whole bunch of other topics. It's really a great component in terms of getting people in on what's going on. Get more people in on the conversation.
Do you also think, radio spreads information, and you can immediately dispel misinformation that comes your way just by dispelling it, into the microphone. Social media is a little tougher because anyone can tweet anything, anyone can post anything, and sometimes it can be reshared. And you're actually retweeting, not you, but misinformation's being retweeted, or how do you combat that?
Even what he was saying, like it's a giant billboard or bulletin board.
Bulletin board is what I have to say.
Well, any plumber can go and put their name on that bulletin board. It doesn't mean that they're a reliable plumber. So not just anybody could be talking weather on social media, and we're not supposed to just trust anything that we read on social media.
Well, I think you hit on a good point. You have to use critical thinking skills. Like for example, there was this problem with social media where people are selling stuff, right? And then they go to meet the buyer, and they know the guy's got cash in his pocket, and it's like a big setup. And you got to think about what you're doing and stop for a moment and kind of walk it through, not just because, let's face it, folks, we're moving in a ultrasonic, fast-moving world today. Things are moving. Something came across my computer about new holiday cyber scams. That has nothing to do. I'm not going to go into a side note here, but it's just amazing the amount of time that people are spending on just disrupting the flow of real reliable communication in so many different ways. Getting back to the Twitter, there's no filter. It's the Wild West. Basically, people, they post what they want and they let it fly. In the old days, right or wrong, with newspapers, radio, and TV, the big three, so to speak, there were editors, there were layers, and it wasn't perfect. And still biases. When you write a story, that's the other thing. When you write a story, we're human beings, so your natural biases are going to enter into your choices of work no matter what you do, no matter how objective you are. We're not spot, right? But back in the old days, they had the editors, they had the layers, and it wasn't perfect, but there was a filter of sorts. So the information you got was checked, double checked, triple checked, and most of the time you got the truth, or at least a semblance of the truth. You can't really say that's the case today. You got to use those critical thinking skills.
That's right. Betty M. Morganworth, nice to have you on. Justin Thomas, Kristen Kaiser says hi to the gang. Melissa Garzone, Colleen Felton, Jack Chebra, nice to have you on. Kyle Fazy, good evening to you as well. Again, we are at the Irish Pub, where we are 7 o'clock every Sunday. Next couple of Sundays, off for the holidays.
And we will not be here.
But we resume. We have a couple guests lined up in early January, so we'll be back the first Sunday in 2019. Hard to believe.
Next year.
That's right. After tonight. Also wanted to mention we had him on a guest not too long ago. It's one of your co-workers, a South Jersey institution. Bob Burns passed away this week suddenly on Tuesday. Any thoughts on Bob?
Oh my gosh. I said it on the air, Dan. I'll say it here, and I'll tell anybody who knows Bob knows this to be true. If you didn't know Bob, Bob was a guy, 2018 years ago, there was a guy who said, in response to somebody, one of the folks was saying, how do we behave when people aren't like us, whatever, and he said, hey, just treat others as you would be treated. Jesus Christ, of course. Bob was a guy who actually lived it. Bob was a guy who treated others as he would be treated. He had such a good nature about him, and just a great guy. Such a shock. It's going to be, people still don't believe it. I don't believe it. I was hearing stories of people on the radio. One guy called him. He said, "I just saw him at the grocery store. 12 hours ago.
Yeah, he was.
He looked great.
Former mayor of Egg Harbor Township, a longtime radio talk show host. He married Amanda, my wife and me, and he was a guest on our show as well, and just a lovable guy. So we do want to send our regards and our best wishes to his family and to his WOND co-workers and to South Jersey, because we lost a good man.
Yeah, I only met him once when we interviewed him, and I agree, he just had that nature, like great nature about him, and he was easy to talk to, wealth of knowledge, and that was just from meeting him one time.
Now, Bob was here on the show?
He was.
And what did you guys talk about with him?
Well, Bob is so easy to talk to. I mean, you bounce different questions off of him, and we stray off on tangents. And you could spend a couple hours talking to Bob, and it just feels like 5 minutes.
And because he also had the background in government, and
Right, that's true.
Also,
That's true.
So.
That's true. A wealth of experience there. No question about it.
Right. Tidal Flooding Talk brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. That's what we do every week. We just try to spread awareness, bring in different guests, and just, keep tidal flooding. There was some this weekend, by the way, some minor stuff, some rain. The weather wasn't ideal this weekend. Going to dry out as we head through the rest of this week after a wet and windy night tonight. And we hope all you guys have nice, quiet weather through the holidays, since so many people are traveling. We hope it's flooding free and storm free and nice and quiet.
I have some questions for you guys regarding tidal flooding, if it's okay. Am I allowed to ask
We're
a
not
question?
usually on the spot, but
No,
okay.
these are good questions.
Bring it. Let's go.
I think they're good questions. We see, obviously, in response, after Sandy, a lot of folks have raised their homes to kind of, hedge themselves against any future flooding. Is that a continuing program? Do you guys know if that's continuing? Is that like a FEMA? Is that left over from Sandy and it's no longer available? Or is that something that people could avail themselves of even now, this many years after Sandy? Does anybody,
Well,
I don't mean to put
have
anybody...
a little experience with that, and I think if you are interested in raising your home, you can contact a few different people to see if there are grants available. For instance, you can even contact the house raising companies, because they're always trying to stay informed about if there are grants available, because that's business.
Kind of like the solar company.
Right, so they're going to be, they'll have that information because they're using that for their business.
Right.
You could also try to research it on FEMA's website, see if there's any grants. But
And we've had home builders and presidents of home building companies on the show as well, and topics we've handled in past shows too. So you guys can always find them on our feed and always go back and visit those shows. But a very good question. I mean, I think it's an ongoing process until either tidal flooding stops or until every home is at a safe distance. Our job's not done, home builders' jobs aren't done, government's job isn't done, keeping people safe. So I think there's longevity in all those, because the threat for tidal flooding will always be there, and there'll always be vulnerable homes and businesses.
Now, how much? Now, I'm not an expert. How much is the water encroaching? Is there an encroachment? Is it just the storms are just so much more intense, or the circumstances surrounding the storms align in such a way that it's an anomaly, but the anomalies seem to be happening on a more regular basis? So, is there really an encroachment of the water on the coast line? And then you look at Wildwood, and you got to get a camel to go from the boardwalk to the water.
Right.
So I know I'm probably asking questions that may not have any answers, but they're probably questions, I don't know, they seem to be...
No, I mean, tidal flooding has always happened along the Jersey Shore. Of course, now there are more people, there are more homes, there are more visitors than ever before, so more people experience it, regardless of, is it more severe, is it going to get more severe, or are we going to get ahead of it? I do think it always happens, it's just there's more people now to experience it.
Right, no question about
Good questions.
I mean, I would say I've seen it, especially trying to drive around. That's when I notice it, because even if it's not expected to be major flooding, you'll notice if there's water in the street, and you can't drive through. So I've noticed that, and then that becomes an issue because people do try to drive through it, and that pushes the water into people's, property, whether it's their cars or
We know
garages.
the area down in Sandy, the area down on Washington Avenue and Margate seems to flood a lot.
Yes.
Over on Fairmount Avenue in Atlantic City, Shore Road and Summers Point, like there seems to be areas. And in Ocean City, there's a whole host of different spots that get, when the conditions are right.
Yeah, there are some spots that get flooded no matter what. There are some spots that only get flooded under certain winds and certain rainfall conditions and certain tide conditions as well. So I think, our job will never be done, which is why we'll be here every Sunday. So our next show is Sunday, January 5th or 6th, the first Sunday in January 2019. Our guest tonight has been Dan Klein. Dan, I really appreciate you being here.
We would like to thank you, the Coalition and the Irish Pub, with an Irish Pub t-shirt.
Hey, how about that?
And Dan, tell people how they can listen to you.
You can check me out on News Talk 1400 WOND Monday to Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. at night. It's the primetime radio show. Love to have you aboard. We talk about a whole host of things. Sometimes we talk about the stuff we're talking about tonight, but of course we talk about everything else that's out there as well. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
That actually gave me one last question. In the radio community, how often is flooding a topic?
Well, certainly when it happens, there's no question about it. And that's the great thing about radio. It's a conduit for people to get real-time information about what's going on. Presuming that the towers and everything are operating properly. But at the end of the day, that's the great thing about radio is being able to disseminate information when people need it most.
Okay. Dan Klein, our guest. Again, we invite you to join us 3 weeks from today. Then, in the meantime, hope you guys all have a very happy holiday,
Yeah,
a
Merry
very
Christmas,
happy
everybody.
New Year.
See you next year.
See you
Happy
next year.
holidays.